Days is up next. Then at 8, join us for all the latest national and international stories of the day.
Can I have a pint of milk and 3 packets of Brexit, please?
The next train is the 11:15 calling at Peterborough, Brexit and Darlington.
Do you want Brexit with that?
Right, you've got the tickets and the passports. Did I pack the Brexits?
Brexit, not just politics, it's everyday life. Find out what it'll mean for you with BBC News.
This is BBC News. I'm Martine Croxall. The headlines at 7. Richard Osborne Brooks, arrested on suspicion of murdering a suspected burglar, has been released without charge. Sergei Skripal, the former Russian spy, is no longer in a critical condition and is responding well to treatment. The Foreign Office has refused his niece a visa to come to the UK and visit her relatives in hospital. Palestinian sources say Israeli troops have killed at least 6 people and wounded more than 400 in renewed violence on Gaza's border with Israel. Campaigners have hailed the introduction of a tax on sugary soft drinks. Also in the next hour, controversy at the sumo wrestling. The head of Japan's Sumo Association has apologised after 2 women were ordered to leave the ring while they were performing life-saving first aid. Good evening and welcome to BBC News. A pensioner who was arrested on suspicion of murder after a struggle with a burglar at his home in South London has been told by police that no further action will be taken against him. Richard Osborne Brooks, who's 78, was detained after the incident at the property in Hither Green on Wednesday morning. Well, our correspondent Simon Jones is following the story and is here with us now. A bit more on the background and where the law stands on this, Simon.
Well, this was in the early hours of Wednesday morning. Mr Osborne Brooks was in his home and he phoned the police saying there were intruders in his house. Now, it's understood they'd got into the house and one of the intruders was armed with a screwdriver and had threatened him. Now, the Met Police said a struggle then ensued and that ended up in one of the suspected burglars, named Henry Vincent, being stabbed. Now, he was found collapsed in the street away from the house a short time after that. He was taken to hospital, but he was pronounced dead at around 3:30 in the morning. Now, after that, the homeowner was arrested initially on suspicion of grievous bodily harm, but then on suspicion of murder. And then we've heard tonight that there has been a development in this case, that there will be no further action taken against him.
Where does the law stand on this then?
Well, when we look at the law, it is all down to what is considered to be reasonable force and someone defending their home. Now, the law was changed actually to clarify it back in 2013, saying if it was a highly stressful situation, if someone was under a great deal of pressure, then if they act using reasonable force, that would not be against the law. Now, it's always debatable what reasonable force actually is, but I think we're talking about if someone were unarmed perhaps as an intruder and then you confronted them and stabbed them, would that be reasonable? Perhaps that wouldn't. If there was someone who was very small in stature and then you used a gun on them, that maybe would not be considered reasonable force. But there was an assumption that if someone enters your house, if you are genuinely petrified and you do take some action such as we had in this case, that could be considered reasonable.
Because there was comments made at quite high levels about this case before this decision was taken.
Yes, we heard from the Justice Secretary David Gauke, who said he made it clear the government's sympathies are with householders who resist during break-ins. Well, the Met Police seem to have gone down that line. They say they've discussed it with the Crown Prosecution Service and decided to take no further action. They say they have informed the family of Henry Vincent, the suspected burglar, about their decision not to take any further action. They describe this as a tragedy for everyone involved. But the police are defending their action because you may remember it produced quite a lot of tabloid headlines saying, well, this man was just defending his own home and now possibly he's going to be charged with murder. But the Met said they had to carry out a thorough investigation to establish the facts. It was right and proper for them to do that. And having looked at it over the past couple of days, they have decided presumably that it was reasonable force and they will take no further action against the pensioner.
Simon, thank you very much. Simon Jones. We'll find out how this story is covered in tomorrow's front pages at 10:40 this evening in the papers. Our guest joining us tonight, Torquil Crichton, political editor with the Daily Record, and Lynn Davidson, Whitehall correspondent at The Sun. The former Russian agent Sergei Skripal is no longer in a critical condition and is responding well to treatment. He's been recovering at Salisbury District Hospital after being poisoned with a nerve agent at the beginning of March. His daughter, Yulia, who was also attacked, said yesterday she's gaining strength daily. Britain says Russia is behind the poisonings, but Moscow has denied any involvement. Our Home Affairs correspondent, Leila Nathu, reports.
They were targeted with a chemical weapon. Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia were hospitalised more than a month ago after being exposed to a nerve agent, a toxic chemical designed to shut down the human body. But they have been fighting its effects. And today the hospital gave this update.
As Yulia herself says, her strength is growing daily and she can look forward to the day when she's well enough to leave hospital. I also want to update you on the condition of her father, Sergei Skripal. He's responding well to treatment, improving rapidly, and is no longer in a critical condition.
It was on the 4th of March that the two were found incapacitated in the centre of Salisbury. They were critically ill. A police officer who was one of the first to respond to the incident was also admitted to hospital. He was discharged a fortnight later. The Skripals had been heavily sedated and unable to communicate, but last week Yulia regained consciousness. Now her father too appears to be making progress.
It's fantastic news, somewhat unexpected I think. We were obviously concerned they were in a very serious state, but we heard earlier this week that Yulia is getting better. But to hear that Sergei himself is also recovering well is excellent news, and I hope to hear more encouraging news in the weeks ahead.
In a statement, a spokesperson for the Foreign Office said, "We are very pleased that both Mr. Skripal and his daughter Yulia are improving. This is a tribute to the hard-working and talented NHS staff in Salisbury who have provided outstanding care. The NHS will continue to provide ongoing care for the Skripals, both of whom are likely to have ongoing medical needs." Yulia Skripal is communicating. Yesterday she put out a statement via police saying she was getting stronger daily. But it's not yet clear whether Sergei Skripal is recovering to the same extent. Yulia, and perhaps her father too, will now become crucial witnesses in the investigation, described by counter-terror police as one of the largest and most complex they have ever carried out. Leila Nathu, BBC News, Salisbury.
Well, earlier our political reporter Jessica Parker gave us the latest from outside Salisbury District Hospital.
So this afternoon we had a statement from the medical director here at Salisbury District Hospital, Dr. Christine Blanchard, and in it she said, well, what was really the key point? I want to update you, she said, on the condition of Sergei Skripal. He is responding well to treatment, improving rapidly, and is no longer in a critical condition. Now this comes a day after we heard in a statement directly from Yulia Skripal that she was growing stronger by the day, that she had been awake for over a week, and in her statement she also thanked the people of Salisbury for helping her and her father when they were found incapacitated on a park bench. Now this is quite a turnaround, given it was 2 weeks ago when we heard through court when a judge was granting chemical weapons inspectors the right to take blood samples that the pair were both heavily sedated. Sergei Skripal unable to communicate in any way, Yulia Skripal unable to communicate in any meaningful way. So a major change in their condition over recent weeks, and I think speculation will now turn in terms of what it could mean for the investigation, how much the pair might be able to help with that investigation. And there has been immediate reaction. First of all, I'll tell you what we've had from the Russian embassy. We've been told today from the Russian embassy they welcome the news of progress in Sergei Skripal's recovery. They say they're grateful to the medical staff treating him and his daughter Yulia and wish them to get well soon. They also say, we are confident that an objective probe will ultimately establish that the claims against Russia by the UK government are null and void. So that gives you a sense of the very heightened sensitivity around any news coming out from Salisbury District Hospital about the condition of the two patients. We've also heard from the UK Foreign and Commonwealth Office, who also say they're pleased that both Mr Skripal and his daughter Yulia are improving. This is a tribute, they say, to the hard-working and talented NHS staff in Salisbury who have provided outstanding care. But they also add, let us be clear, this was attempted murder using an illegal chemical weapon that we know Russia possesses.
Jessica Parker reporting from Salisbury. The head of the Metropolitan Police has insisted the force hasn't lost control of London's streets. Following a string of murders in the capital, Commissioner Cressida Dick said this wasn't a time for blame but for working together, although she did say her officers were stretched. Our Home Editor, Mark Easton, reports.
More than 50 killings in the capital since the beginning of the year, a catalogue of tragedy that has shone a spotlight on the work of the Metropolitan Police and its Commissioner, Cressida Dick. She has found herself having to respond to a wave of public anxiety and anger.
Commissioner, have you lost control of the streets of London?
We have not lost control of the streets. I can understand why some people are very worried at the moment.
People are frightened.
Particularly in some areas of London. We've had some ghastly homicides, as you know, particularly in the last few days, including those of really young people. That is bound to be very frightening.
People are scared stiff out there. What can you say to reassure them?
What I can say is that the Metropolitan Police are out there. Just this weekend we have an extra 300 officers each day in the areas which are the most significant hotspots where there's been high levels of knife crime. But they are above and beyond all the other officers, those who are working in covert roles, those who are on patrol, those who are in the neighbourhoods, the people who are saving lives every day, arresting people, taking weapons off the streets, targeting the most violent, and doing everything they can to bear down on street violence.
Have you, though, got enough resources? Have you got enough police officers?
Every police chief would always want more officers and more resources, of course. It's my job to make the case for more and also to make the best use of what we've got.
Well, do you think that the awful, tragic spike in homicides that we've seen this year is down to cuts in police budgets?
No, I don't. I think that our job is stretched, but the causes of knife crime, the causes of violent crime, are very complex and long-running. This is something I talked about from the day I arrived as one of my highest priorities. I'm really sorry these people have lost their lives. I don't say they've lost their lives because we've suffered cuts, but of course I need to make the best use of my officers. I need to get as many people as I can out on the streets. That's what we're doing this weekend. That's what we'll be doing in the weeks to come.
You talk about priorities. What about the priority of infiltrating the gangs, of getting that intelligence that means that you're one step ahead?
Now, these are challenging offences to investigate. But of course you will probably have noticed that we nearly always arrest people, we nearly always charge people. We have a fantastic homicide investigation capability. Of the 5 tragic cases this week, we have arrested already in all but 1.
Among the 5 arrests confirmed by the Commissioner today is that of a 30-year-old man in connection with the murder of Tanisha Melbourne, who was shot in Tottenham on Monday. But while progress in these cases will take some pressure off the Met, the Commissioner accepts that more important is to prevent the killings from happening in the first place. Mark Easton, BBC News, North London.
We can speak now to the Labour MP Vicky Foxcroft, who represents the Lewisham-Deptford constituency. She's also chair of the Youth Violence Commission, which is made up of MPs from different parties and is aimed at finding solutions to youth violence. She joins us now live from Deptford in South East London. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. To what extent have the police lost control of the streets, as one former officer claimed earlier in the week?
I don't think that the police lost control of the streets. I think that actually a long-term and complex problem, and it actually involves long-term solutions. You know, just like the rises in violence don't come about overnight, nor do the solutions happen overnight. And it's the reason why one of the things that we've gone to do in terms of the Youth Violence Commission is really look at long-term solutions. So when we talk about having a strategy to go and tackle this, we don't talk about a quick fix in terms of 1 or 2 year strategy, but actually we need a 10, 15, 20-year strategy that actually involves all of the different partners, so all of the different agencies that come into contact with children, to have a very integrated approach in terms of working together and sharing data.
What then are those various elements that make it so complex and the solutions that are required?
I think the thing is that sometimes you could talk about, for example, going and making sure that all knives back in shops were stored behind counters, you know, and of course that's something that the government should do and legislate for absolutely straight away. But actually there are a lot of complex issues in terms of children and the experiences they're having and the amount of trauma that they're experiencing. And, you know, if children are starting to feel like actually they're safer carrying a knife than not carrying a knife, then we need to go and understand that and make sure that we go and ensure that they've gone and got that trust in terms of the police, so that we've got more policing in terms of schools, in terms of primary schools, so that they can build those relationships with the police, and also that all of the different agencies such as education, healthcare, social work are all working together to make sure that there's that wraparound support around children as they're growing up.
The Met Police Commissioner has said that an extra 300 officers will be patrolling the city this weekend. How helpful is that as a visible presence?
I think that it's extremely important that people go and see police on the street, that they're able to speak to them and engage with them. I do think that we need to make sure that we've got more policing in our schools and more police and community support officers that are there actually engaging in their local communities, gathering that intelligence and working with the local communities to go and tackle, you know, the rise in youth violence.
Yeah, that's very much a case of engagement with the community by the police, isn't it? Which was very much the Glasgow experience, as we were talking to the reduction unit there yesterday. So what place is there, if at all, for stop and search, and how should it be used?
I think that if stop and search is used, it absolutely has to be evidence-led, and that's the reason why you need to have those police and community support officers on the ground. But actually, in terms of some of the stuff in terms of the violence reduction unit in Scotland, you know, as part of the work of the Youth Violence Commission, we've gone and sent people up to Scotland to see what lessons can we learn in terms of what they've gone and done. You know, and when we were talking to Karen McCluskey, one of the leads in terms of that, she was saying they went and had a 10-year strategy. But actually, if they were to revisit that, perhaps we need to have a 15 and 20-year strategy. And actually, it's really about getting in there early with young people to prevent them ever feeling like they need to carry a knife in the future.
Vicky Foxcroft, thank you very much for talking to us. Vicky Foxcroft, Chair of the Youth Violence Commission. We appreciate you taking time to talk to us this evening. Thank you. A 16-year-old boy is among at least 6 people killed during protests on Gaza's border with Israel. Troops opened fire on the protesters attempting to breach the frontier fence. Last week, hundreds of Palestinians were injured and more than a dozen killed in the bloodiest day of violence since the war in Gaza 4 years ago. Well, the UN's High Commissioner for Human Rights has called on Israel to stop the use of what it called excessive force.
In policing the Green Line fence, Israeli security forces are required by international human rights law to respect the rights to peaceful assembly and expression, and to use, to the extent possible, non-violent means to discharge their duties.
You're watching BBC News. A reminder of our headlines this evening. Richard Osborne Brooks, arrested on suspicion of murdering a suspected burglar, has been released without charge. Sergei Skripal, the former Russian spy, is no longer in a critical condition and is responding well to treatment. The Met Police Commissioner offers reassurance to Londoners after a string of murders. More than 14,000 patients have been waiting more than a year for non-urgent operations and procedures in Northern Ireland, which is 8 times the number in England. The figures have been released by the Royal College of Surgeons, which said the political stalemate in Northern Ireland was risking the well-being of patients. Our health editor, Hugh Pym, reports.
This house don't feel like home anymore.
This was Megan when we met her 5 months ago, doing what she loved. But every move was painful.
Words of despair, your clothes on the floor.
That's because her spine looked like this. It was getting worse and she sometimes struggled to breathe. But after a fundraising campaign allowed her to have an operation in Turkey, this is what it looks like today.
So you're taking your first steps here, are you, after the operation?
Yeah.
How did that feel?
Really good, but it was really sore.
Wee tiny steps. That's a girl. Fantastic. Yeah. Fantastic.
Your mum and dad are there as well?
Yeah. It was really painful and I felt really drowsy and sick and wanted to go back to bed. I was so happy because I just wanted to get over and done with and then get back on the road to recovery.
It was looking bleak for Megan's family when they were told she'd have to wait a year for the operation on the NHS in Belfast. That's why they felt they had to go private.
What do you think it tells you about the state of the NHS?
It's a shambles. It's a mess. It's no fault of the surgeons, it's no fault of the nurses. It's awful. It's just seeing your child in pain every day, knowing that you can't help them, and the only way for a lot of families is to fundraise or to actually remortgage your house.
You decided what you want on this here yet?
Just a few miles away, another family relived their ordeal. The NHS in Northern Ireland arranged for Sophie to have spinal surgery in England, but only after a 20-month wait, including the stress of a last-minute